Well, good morning and welcome to Zen Live and a new metaphor for your toolbox. So, as you know, if you're just dropping in, I use the Eckhart Tolle quote from The Power of Now to kind of like give a little direction to the talk, but the talk is going to be, we're going to fly. In other words, it'll be spontaneous with a metaphor that when I read this quote before the talk, this metaphor came to mind. So that will be what is going to be the cocoon. The metaphor is the cocoon out of which the butterfly will emerge. And that butterfly is greater understanding. And greater understanding is flight. Greater understanding lifts us out of the worm of misunderstanding. You see? So anyway, here's the quote, and then we'll get going. The closer we get to the end of our present evolutionary stage, the more dysfunctional the ego becomes. In the same way that a caterpillar becomes dysfunctional just before it transforms into the butterfly. But the new consciousness is arising even as the old dissolves. Well, boy, when I read that, that butterfly metaphor just took off. Now, the problem we have, the closer we get to the end of our present evolutionary stage. Now, the problem we have with this, not that it's wrong, but it's limited. And what is the limitations? Is that it's saying the closer we get, and that means mankind, in other words, the closer we get, that's mankind, to the end of our present evolutionary stage, mankind's present evolutionary stage, the more dysfunctional mankind gets. And then he goes on into the caterpillar. But the new consciousness of mankind is arising even as the old consciousness of mankind dissolves. So you'd notice that this is all about third person. There's no I in here. So the closer I get to the end of my present evolutionary stage, the more dysfunctional I become. In the same way a caterpillar becomes dysfunctional just before it transforms into a butterfly. But my new consciousness is arising even as my old consciousness dissolves. You see how that changes the paradigm here? You see, in the West, we're locked into an objective paradigm about everything is an it. So if I want to fly out of my suffering, all the manuals are just talking about it, about mankind, how mankind can fly out of his suffering, or how somebody or the group or even me is an it, you see. But I hurt, you see. I hurt is first person. So, we need to understand these teachings from a first person viewpoint. So let's use the butterfly. Let's get into this. This is what I had this up yesterday. Wake up! It's time to evolve. And also I had this little picture of the Buddha sitting under the tree, which is a metaphor. So we're going to look at this metaphor. There are three stages. There's the worm, there's the cocoon, and there's the butterfly. We crawl, there is a transitional stage, an intermediary zone, and we don't know what's going in there because there's a cocoon. We can't, what's going in there? It's like magic. You don't actually see the worm turning into a butterfly. It's all closed up. There's a curtain. The magician puts the woman in the box. You put the worm in the box. You put a curtain there. The box goes boop, 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 boop. And then you take the curtain away and the butterfly goes, ta-da! What goes on in there? Well, the IT map won't tell you. The IT manual can't tell you what's going on in there. Because the IT manual is all about an object, and you're not an object. You're in there, you see. So you have to get a manual that helps you get free from the cocoon in your feelings as an I. In first person. See, even you can't even talk about this in our language because our language is all about it's. A subject, a verb, and an object. It. In other words, our language is all about third person. The only language in which the first person speaks is poetry or music. Music and poetry is first person. So when we listen to music and poetry, I and the poet are one. Je suis the poet. So in first person, I become the poet as the poet sings the song. I am feeling the music as the poet feels it when he writes it. Time collapses in the first person. Time is in third person. It, when you can't have an it, is in time. But I am not in time because I'm now. I hurt now. I'm in pain now. If somebody looks at me now or go to a psychiatrist and he may map out my pain, say, oh, it was caused by this and all this. Or you go to a yoga teacher and, oh, well, do this yoga and you'll get out of it. Or you go to a Buddha teacher and do this meditation and you'll get out of it, you see. But what do you do inside the cocoon? Nobody knows. Because it can't go there. Anyway, Buddha went there. And he did leave a manual for the cocoon, for the dysfunction. So when Tolle says, the closer we get to the end of our present evolutionary stage, so the closer we get to the end of my pain, the more pain I'm going to have, in the same way that the pain is dysfunctional. So we need to look at, but we have to go to everyday mind. Now, one of the things that really brought me to my awareness in Zen was that when the student asked the master, what is enlightenment? They're always asking, what is enlightenment? Go to Facebook, everybody's saying, what is enlightenment? And everybody's telling you what it is. As if it's an it. Enlightenment is not an it. So, what is enlightenment? So the master says, everyday mind. Well, this just blows the disciple away because he's coming to the master to get out of everyday mind. And the master says, enlightenment, in other words, where you're trying to go, the butterfly you're trying to become is the worm. What? The butterfly is the worm? But the whole thing, I'm here because I want to get out of this worm. The worm crawls. The worm hates. The worm is in pain. That's enlightenment? Get out of there. So, all right, let's go back to the Buddha just for a moment, and then we'll come over here to what I drew up here was the worm, the cocoon, and the butterfly. And I thought, well, that's like alchemy. Alchemy takes the base metal, the worm, does some magic, and turns it into gold. So the most important part of this is not the worm or the gold, is not the worm or the butterfly, but the cocoon. The dysfunction. How do we deal with dysfunction? If I don't deal with it correctly, I stay in the cocoon. I can't get out. I stay in prison. I stay in this bad relationship. I stay in this suffering. The whole point of, see, Buddha, and here again, Buddha is not, see, we can look at the story of Buddha like they do on the Hindu Netflix thing I've just been watching, and it's the story of Buddha as an it. There's the Buddha in time, and here's his story. That's the story of, that's an it story. Third person. But the Buddha nature, the living Buddha, is you. So how do I figure that out, you see? Well, that was the question that Buddha asked the Siddhartha as the story. When you look at the story as metaphor, this is why metaphor is so important. When you look at the story as metaphor, it points to an it, but it points to an I at the same time. The metaphor has two fingers, two pointers. One finger points to the it, the story. There it is. The other finger, which we don't see, points to I, first person. I. So, when the I, the first person, is awakened, there's no time. Time is only in third person. So when you're listening to music, and you feel the music, you are the music, and the music is you. Now, the music was written in time by a poet, songwriter, a Buddha. So Cole Porter, night and day, you are the one, under the moon and beneath the sun. Okay, those words stir the heart. They can make you cry. That's first person. I am. When you feel the song, you are the song. You're not feeling, you can't feel an it. You can look at an it, you can describe an it, you can write stories about it, you can get a PhD in the it. But you are not the it. It's separate. So you study it. But you can't say, je suis the it, because you can't study it unless you're separate from it, you see? So this it world, the objective world, describes it, but you don't feel it, you see. So we turn to music. We love music. So when the song is playing, you don't study the song objectively. Oh, you can. But that isn't why we listen. When we listen to the song and we feel the song, je suis, I am, the song. And what is the song but the poet's feelings captured in the song in a time capsule, so you can put that song, you can open that song and become the song. Isn't that interesting? What you're listening to is the emotions and the feelings the poet had when he wrote the song. And art is basically a metaphor that is captured in form, that is vibrating inside with the feeling of the poet, the artist, inside of it, captured. And when you open that up, you and the poet are one in that song. It's almost like the song is the cocoon, and the worm wrote the poem, wrote the song about flying, and created the cocoon, and you, as a worm, become the cocoon, and you fly with the poet. But this is a temporary butterfly, because when the song is over, you go back to your worm existence. So you get all wormy, and then you listen to some more music and fly. So the Buddha, this worm existence, this crawling, was what Buddha saw, or Siddhartha saw, when he left his pleasure palace or cocoon. You see, his father created a pleasure palace where there would be no old age, sickness, and death. Because he knew that if Siddhartha saw, according to the prophecy, if Siddhartha saw old age, sickness, and death, he would fly away in order to find an end to old age, sickness, and death. And that's what happened. So Siddhartha sees old age, he sees the worm. And he sees the worm in himself. Je suis the worm. I am old age, sickness. I am going to get old. I am going to get sick. And I am going to die. That's first person. That's not an it. That's as existentialism, you see. That's the first realization that I am mortal, that this form is going to die. Usually we only have that realization when the doctor calls up and says you got cancer. Or you have a close encounter with death, maybe in the car. Whew, I was almost dead there. So when we have close encounters with death, we're kind of like the Buddha seeing the worm. We're seeing our own old age, sickness, and death. But Siddhartha says, wait a minute. Is this my destiny? Is this our destiny to be a worm? Just to crawl upon the face of the earth? And then dying? Well, even Jesus said, was speaking from first person, was speaking as a Buddha. When Jesus said, if the seed falls to the earth and does not die, it stands alone as a worm. If the seed dies, it bears fruit. It flies like a butterfly. So, Jesus was apparently liberated from old age, sickness, and death. And the Buddha, when Siddhartha became the Buddha means the one who is the awakened one. And then one of the first teachings of the Buddha was that we all have Buddha nature. We're all butterflies, believing we are worms. The only thing that keeps the butterfly, the worm a butterfly, is its belief that it's a worm. And the collective belief that it's a worm, you see. Well, this is the human world. We live in human beings, you and I. We live in worlds believed in. We live in and perceive the world as we believe it to be. So if everyone believes they're worms, we're going to see worms everywhere. But something's wrong. Something's missing. Something's not right. The line of the poem, I repeat, a bodiless child full of life cries with frog voice in the gloom, what shall I be? What shall I be? Something is alive in me and I don't know what it is. What shall I be? You see? That's the butterfly. That's the butterfly in the heart. The heart is the butterfly. The mind is the worm. The mind crawls on form, attached to form, identifying with form. The butterfly flies off of form. The butterfly is creative. It's not like we just fly off the earth. No. The butterfly is the creative mind, the inspired mind, the liberated mind, the spontaneous mind, the fresh mind, the joyous mind, the complete mind, the whole mind. All kinds of words. And so that completeness, that wholeness then, is what Eckhart Tolle is calling the next evolutionary stage. The butterfly is the next evolutionary stage of the worm. Now here's the thing. The worm has no idea what the butterfly is. We have no idea what our next evolutionary stage is. We can't imagine it because it's unknown, because it never existed before. Now, this is the problem here again of its. When we live in an it world, we think about the butterfly as existing. Metaphorically speaking, the worm and the butterfly are it, so they exist. But from the first person view, the butterfly does not exist, and I have no idea what it is. From the first person view, all I know is the worm. And all I know is the pain of the worm. And that pain is the dysfunction. So when everything is going fine, everything is working, I'm following in my father's or mother's footsteps, I'm obeying all the rules, I've gone to the proper fraternity, I've got the degree, I've got a good job, I got a nice house, I got a nice family and a new car, maybe 2 cars, maybe 3. I got plenty of insurance. I got a savings account. I've got my whole life looks rosy all the way. And then when I retire, I'll have an adequate retirement, and I can just sit back and play bridge and golf. Everything's fine. Why should I change? This worm existence is great. I like being in fact, there's no idea that there's any better existence. This is great. So as long as everything is going great, there's no evolution. It's only when the cross comes that there's evolution. It's only when the straitjacket comes is there evolution. It's only when dysfunction comes is there evolution. So when does dysfunction come? Well, it comes when everything crashes. Lose the job, lose the wife, lose the husband, somebody I depended upon dies, or there is just a quiet dissatisfaction that grows. Is this all there is to life? Just watching TV and buying new stuff? Just going to Costco? Is that all there is to life? You see? Doing what the commercials tell me to do. Oh, buy this car. It's better than the one you got. Oh, okay. Maybe that will relieve me from my dissatisfaction. You see. So all these commercials are basically the worm culture selling us illusions that if we get this new attachment, we'll be free from the feeling of being a worm. And that lasts briefly. There's a little bit of flapping and butterflying there, but then back in the worm. So the dream of the butterfly to the worm is always a dream that comes in the form of getting something new and better. It's always in form. The it world is locked in form. That's all that exists when your language and your worldview is all about it. Third person. Nouns. It's. Qualification. Description. Spend all of our time describing something. Or arguing about it, you see. An opinion is it. A belief is an it. A judgment is an it. Everything is an it. In the it world, like a hammer. To a hammer, everything is a nail. To an it, everything is an it. There is no I. And that's what's missing. That's the butterfly. That's the butterfly that's missing from the it world. I am. I am. I exist. Not as an it, but as I. And that's the awakening of the Buddha. When the Buddha wakes from his sitting, he exclaims, throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the most honored one. Now that is not an it statement, because if you look at it as an it statement, that is the most arrogant thing you could ever say. It's not an it statement. It's a first person statement. I think adolescence probably is the first time we hear the roar of the Buddha. The adolescence is the cocoon, the transitional stage where the child becomes an adult, an independent adult, free from the attachments of childhood and the mother and the parent, free from the backyard. Now the whole world is your yard. Free from playing with childhood's toys. Now you play with big things, big toys, you see. Not play guns, real guns. So even there, you see, the adolescent hears the cry of the butterfly within him, and he wants to say, Je suis independent. I am free, you see, of the cocoon, of the worm. You see, that's an evolutionary stage. And this is another topic, but in our particular culture, that adolescent cocoon sometimes goes until we're 40. If you can have the adolescent cocoon, because it has no real passage into adulthood, gets stretched out like spaghetti, and then it becomes a market. So a whole industry is built up on selling to the pain of adolescence. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. But we're talking about this stage here, and we don't know what's in here, you see. All we know that this is a cry of the first person. When the worm is working, when the worm is happy, it's happy in the it world. But when something awakes within, it's the first person. It's the I. Who am I? Who am I in this it world? I'm not an it. I'm not a thing. My life matters. But even my life is not an it. I mean, my life, we look at it as an it. My life is an it. That's not the first person. The first person doesn't know what it is, because it's discovered that it's not an it, but I don't know what I am. I don't know who I am, because I cannot be this feeling, this urge, this yearning cannot be defined and turned into an it. I try, but it doesn't work, you see. So the first person is timeless. The first person cannot be described by the third person, by the it. You see, the third person, or let's say the other person, is somebody who looks at me and describes me, and objectifies me and judges me and pins me against the wall so I can't fly. But inside, I refuse to be pinned to the wall. I refuse to be judged, but I also can't judge myself. If I judge myself, oh, you're an idiot, I just turn myself into a worm. If I blame myself, if I blame others or blame myself for the dysfunction, if I blame others or myself for the stress and the dysfunction and the lose-lose situations, I just turn myself into a worm. I don't fly, you see. So we really have to get into this dysfunction, the stress, the lose-lose, the worm loop. I do this little thing here because just before I came here, I was looking at some YouTube thing and somebody was trying to put a worm on a hook. Okay. The worm, our feeling of being a worm, has a hook in it that's pulling us. Who's pulling us? Now, if you want to put this in a religious context, God's pulling you. I'm caught by God. Or you can say, I'm caught by the Buddha. I'm caught by my own evolution. I'm caught by my own soul. Something has caught me and is pulling me. I don't know who caught me. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what this pulling is, you see. But something's got its hook in me. What shall I be? What shall I be? The artist feels this. When you have a creative impulse, it's like something has hooked me. Something wants to be born. This poem, this painting, this music, this dance. I've got to do it. That's the cocoon. So there is an alchemy that goes on in the cocoon that we can't see. And suddenly, boom, the creative idea comes. I know. And you write it down. Or you dance it out. Or you play it on the piano. Or you paint it. And the butterfly is telling you what to do. That's a universal feeling of the artist when creativity strikes. They feel like the art is doing them. They feel like that something is doing them. That's why we love sex. Sometimes we fall into that spontaneous zone of sex where we feel like the sex is doing us. We're not doing it, something is doing us, you see. Sports. This athlete falls into this, where the game is doing him. I'm not doing anything. This feeling that something is doing us. I remember when, I won't I'm running out of time. So anyway, the idea here that we're working on is that the most important stage, you got the worm, you got the cocoon, you got the butterfly. The most important place is this cocoon. This is the magic act, where you discover how to let the butterfly in you out. And this is all what the Buddha tradition, Buddha teaching is about from the first person, or any non-dual tradition. A non-dual tradition, whether it's in yoga or Christianity or Sufism, or Jewish or Christian mysticism, all of these mystical non-dual traditions are about the cocoon and how the worm transforms itself into a liberated consciousness. See, so the Buddha flies above the forms of old age, sickness, and death. So when Siddhartha goes out and sees old age, sickness, and death, and he sees the worm, not in other people, so, I want to help these worms. No, I am a worm. I'm going to die, and I want to find out if there is an end to this worm existence. I want to find out how to fly above old age, sickness, and death. Now that does not mean, that is not a third person it teaching, because this does not mean that you are going to fly above the old age, sickness, and death of form and be an angel or not die. No, we're all going to get old, sick, and die. Everything is impermanent. However, can I fly above that? Can I be joyous, awake, and aware despite old age, sickness, and death? Now, my mother she lived to be 102, and she was still awake and aware and happy when she took her final sleep. She would now say, she was a Buddha. Well, no. But I do know that she was liberated from old age, sickness, and death, because she didn't resist it. So the whole metaphor of the Buddha is basically to sit in old age, sickness, and death without moving, without resisting it. If you look in the mirror, oh my God, I'm getting old. Oh, look at that gray, I'm getting old. Oh no, I'm a worm, I'm going to die. That's not the Buddha teaching. The Buddha teaching is to look in the mirror and see the wrinkles and laugh. Laughter is the butterfly. What you can laugh, that's first person. You're not an it laughing. When you laugh, you are first person. When you laugh, you're a Buddha. That's why we love comedy. Makes us feel like a Buddha. Makes us feel like a butterfly. No matter how bad old age sickness gets, no matter how low we feel when we crawl, when we laugh, we're flying like a butterfly. Laughter is first person. When a whole bunch of people laugh, there's just one laugh. It's not a whole bunch of it's laughing. Unless you're standing out to the sidewalk and you're looking at all these people laughing, you say, oh, look at all these it's laughing. But when you're laughing, you're not an it. Je suis the laughter. You see? It's all one laughter. It's all one now. It's all one laugh. And so when the Buddha says, throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the most honored one, that is the laughter speaking. Throughout heaven and earth, this laughter that I am laughing right now is the one. There is only one laugh. Unless you flip into third person and say, oh, there's thousands of laughters in this big auditorium. Look at all those people laughing. But I'm not laughing. As soon as I laugh, boom, I am the laughter of the room. Isn't that interesting? Laughter is the butterfly. So, thank you for dropping in, and I shall see you this evening at Martini time.